If your training keeps falling apart every time life gets busy, problem probably isn't discipline, it's the plan itself. When you're a parent, fatigue is rarely just one bad night of sleep and then everything goes back to normal. It usually sits in the background in one form or another. Poor sleep, sick kids, work stress, late nights, early mornings. There is almost always something taking a bit out of you. And when that fatigue starts to build, training is usually the first thing that takes the hit. Progress slows, sessions get skipped, and before long, one bad week turns into 2 or 3 and you feel like you've lost all momentum. That doesn't mean that you need more motivation or that you need to become more disciplined. In most cases, it just means that your training setup only works when life is calm, and for most parents, life is not calm for very long. So the real shift is not about somehow finding endless energy. It's about finding the difference between being a bit tired and being genuinely over-fatigued, and then building your training lifestyle in a way that holds up when life gets messy. That is what I want to talk you through in this video, because this is exactly how I think about it for myself and for the parents I coach. The first thing is getting food right, because this is one of the first areas that usually falls apart when parents are tired. Most people tend to go in one of 2 directions. They eat rubbish because they cannot be bothered to prepare anything decent, or they undereat because they cannot be bothered full stop. Both create problems. When protein intake starts to fall, recovery falls with it. When calories get too low, energy availability drops. Strength starts to slide, motivation dips, and if overall food quality starts to deteriorate as well, you end up feeling worse across the board. So rather than trying to be better when you're tired, it makes more sense to remove friction and make eating easier to follow. That is where structure helps massively. Have 2 or 3 anchor breakfasts and 2 or 3 anchor lunches that are high in protein, easy to prepare and easy to repeat. The kind of meal that goes into your trolley every single week without too much thought. That way you are not constantly asking yourself what you should eat because the decision has already been made. And when you are fatigued, that matters more than most people realise. Keep protein high and keep a bit more flexibility at the weekend, but during the week, boring and repeatable is often your friend. When fatigue is high, complexity is usually the thing that pushes people off track. The second thing is understanding minimum effective dose, and this is probably one of the most important ideas for busy parents to understand. You do not need to chase the hardest possible version of training every week. You just need enough stimulus to move things forward. My own training is built around that idea. Most of my gym sessions are around 35 to 45 minutes. I have one run that is shorter at roughly 30 minutes and one that is a bit longer and slower. That is not because more training is automatically bad, it is because I want a structure that still works when life is busy, sleep is disrupted, and energy is not perfect. When things are chaotic, the sessions that work best are usually the ones that are short, purposeful, and familiar. You can walk in, get on with them, and get out without spending loads of mental energy. This is why cutting junk matters so much. If you're a runner, that might mean removing pointless mileage that just adds fatigue without really improving anything. If you lift, it might mean stripping out unnecessary volume and exercise variation. Most people do not need endless sets and 5 versions of the same movement pattern every week. They usually make better progress by doing less but repeating it consistently. For a lot of the parents I coach, that looks like 2 conditioning sessions each week, one steady and one faster, alongside full body lifting sessions that cover the main movement patterns. That kind of setup works well because even if one session gets disrupted, the whole week is not ruined. The structure has some resilience built into it, and that is a big part of what keeps people moving forward. The third piece of the puzzle is recovery days, and although this sounds obvious, it gets ignored all the time. A lot of people who are already tired end up responding by trying to train more often because they feel they are falling behind. But that usually just creates another problem. You carry fatigue into every session, performance drops, and then you inevitably miss a workout because life gets in the way. You feel frustrated on top of already being tired. So building recovery into the week on purpose is important, especially if life already places a high recovery demand on you. I also think it's worth not overcomplicating recovery. If things like saunas, ice baths, or foam rollers, genuinely help you relax, then fine. But if they just become another task you feel guilty about not doing, they're probably not helping you in the way that you think they are. Recovery is not about adding more stuff, it is about creating enough space for your body and mind to actually settle. The next thing is supplements, and I always see these as a way of giving yourself a fighting chance rather than as a magic solution. Supplements will not fix poor sleep and they will not remove stress, but they can support the basics. Creatine is an obvious one because it supports strength performance and there is growing interest around its cognitive benefits as well. Basic multivitamin can help cover some of the nutritional gaps, especially during winter when illness is doing the rounds and sunlight is limited. Omega-3 can be useful for joint, heart and brain health, and hydration matters more than many people think, particularly when people are tired and end up running on coffee all day instead of fluids. None of that replaces sleep, but the basics are supported well. Your system is in a better place to cope with the demands being placed on it. A quick word on alcohol is worth adding here too. I'm not saying the occasional social drink is a disaster, because it's not, but if alcohol shows up regularly during a phase when you are already under-recovered, it's usually making things harder rather than easier. Sleep quality drops, mood takes a hit, and recovery tends to suffer. So it's worth being honest with yourself about whether it is actually helping you unwind or whether it is just quietly making the week more difficult. The final piece, and probably the most important one, is learning to control what you can control. Stress has a much bigger influence on recovery than most people appreciate, and a lot of parents end up paying a huge amount of mental load simply because they are constantly thinking about everything that could go wrong or everything they are failing to stay on top of. The problem with that is worrying about things you cannot control does not solve them. It just adds mental fatigue on top of physical fatigue. Everything I have talked about so far sits inside the controllable bucket. You can control your food structure, you can control session length, you can control whether you're doing junk volume, you can control how often alcohol shows up. What you cannot control is chaos that comes with parent life. Kids will wake up early, work will become stressful, plans will change. Sleep will sometimes be poor, even when you have done everything right. I learned that the hard way when my son was born because I initially tried to keep everything exactly the same as it was before. Same training volume, same expectations, same standards. And it just did not work. I was more tired, more frustrated, and progress stalled because I was trying to force an old structure into a completely different style of life. What changed things was not some massive breakthrough, it was simplifying everything. Shorter sessions, more food structure, lower expectations around perfection, and accepting that some weeks were simply maintenance weeks. Once I stopped fighting that and started working with reality rather than against it, training became much easier to sustain. And that really is the main idea here. If you build your whole training life around perfect conditions, it will keep falling apart every time life gets hard. But if you build a structure that assumes life will sometimes be messy, you give yourself a much better chance of staying consistent. So when I bring this all together, the message is pretty simple. Eat with enough structure that fatigue does not wreck your recovery. Train with minimum effective dose so your plan still works when life is busy. Build recovery into the week instead of trying to train every day. Support the basics with hydration and sensible supplements, and put your energy into things that you can control rather than burning yourself out over things you cannot control. You don't need perfect conditions to make progress, you need a structure that survives imperfect ones. If you want help building that kind of structure around parent life, check the link below, join my free school community. Everything is laid out properly there. If you've got any questions about your own situation, drop me a message on Instagram or school.